The 21st of February, 1965, 2:47 p.m. Malcolm X adjusted his tie one last time. His bodyguard whispered, "We should leave, something's wrong." Malcolm smiled that cold, knowing smile. "Brother, I've been dead for 3 weeks. Today, I just make it official." He walked toward the Audubon Ballroom stage. 400 people waited inside, and Malcolm knew at least 5 of them were there to kill him. What nobody understood, not the assassins, not the FBI, not even his closest allies, was that Malcolm X had turned his own death into the most brilliant chess move in civil rights history. The plan was already in motion, and in 90 seconds, everything would change forever. 3 weeks earlier, Malcolm's phone had rung at 3 a.m. The voice was disguised, electronic, but the message was crystal clear. "You have until the 21st of February, the Audubon, make peace with your God." Most men would have fled, gone underground, disappeared into witness protection. But Malcolm X wasn't most men. He hung up the phone, walked to his desk, and did something that would have shocked his enemies. He started writing letters. Not goodbye letters, battle plans, see. Malcolm had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Prison had taught him that sometimes you can't avoid the trap, but you can control what happens when it springs. Malcolm wrote 47 letters that night, to civil rights leaders across America, to reporters in Europe, to human rights organizations worldwide. Each letter contained the same explosive information, the names, the dates, the proof. Everything Malcolm had learned about the conspiracy against him, not just from the Nation of Islam, from the FBI, from the CIA, from politicians who smiled at him in public and signed his death warrant in private. But here is the brilliant part. Malcolm didn't send the letters, not yet. Instead, he gave them to someone the assassins would never suspect, his 9-year-old daughter, Atala, baby, he said, kneeling down to her level. "If something happens to Daddy, you take these letters to Uncle James. You tell him Daddy said it is time." Uncle James was James Farmer, head of the Congress of Racial Equality. A man Malcolm trusted completely. A man who would know exactly what to do with 47 letters that could bring down the entire conspiracy. Malcolm had turned his death into a dead man's switch. The 15th of February, 6 days before the assassination, Malcolm received another call. This time, the voice wasn't disguised. "Malcolm, this is Captain Joseph. We need to talk." Captain Joseph X was one of Malcolm's oldest friends from the Nation of Islam. They'd been in prison together. They'd studied Islam together. Joseph had been best man at Malcolm's wedding. "I am listening," Malcolm said. "They're serious about Sunday, 5 men professional killers. But Malcolm." Joseph's voice broke. "I can stop it, just say the word. I can make them disappear." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Joseph, how many years have we been fighting for our people's freedom?" 15 years. "And how many years have they been killing our leaders?" "Too many." "You know what the problem is, brother? We keep dying for nothing. Our deaths don't change anything. They just make the enemy stronger." Malcolm walked to his window looking out at Harlem. But what if a death could do more than a lifetime of speeches? What if dying the right way could accomplish what living couldn't? Joseph was silent. "Let them come," Malcolm said. "But make sure the right people are watching." That is when Malcolm made his most dangerous call to a reporter named Mike Wallace, the same man who'd interviewed him dozens of times, the man who'd made Malcolm famous on national television. "Mike, I need you at the Audubon on Sunday. Bring cameras. Something historic is going to happen." "Malcolm, what are you planning?" "I am going to give the most important speech of my life, the one they'll never be able to silence." Wallace tried to talk him out of it, tried to convince him to go to the authorities. But Malcolm had learned something during his pilgrimage to Mecca that changed everything. He'd learned that true power comes from sacrifice. Not the sacrifice of others, the sacrifice of yourself. The 21st of February, 1965, the Audubon Ballroom. Malcolm's wife, Betty, begged him not to go. His bodyguard said it was suicide. Even his closest allies thought he'd lost his mind. But Malcolm understood something they didn't. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about the movement, and sometimes the movement needs martyrs more than it needs leaders. 2:30 p.m. Malcolm arrived at the Audubon. The crowd was already gathering. 400 people, just like he'd expected, but hidden in that crowd were the 5 assassins and something else. Something the killers didn't know about. Mike Wallace's camera crew, hidden in the balcony, rolling film 3 FBI agents who thought they were there to watch Malcolm die, but who were actually about to become witnesses to the greatest political theater in American history. And scattered throughout the audience, 15 civil rights leaders from across the country. People Malcolm had personally invited. People who would carry his message to every corner of America. Malcolm had turned his assassination into the most watched political event of the 1960s. 2:47 p.m. Malcolm stepped onto the stage. He could see them now. The 5 killers, Norman 3X Butler in the 3rd row. Thomas Hagen near the back. 3 others whose names he didn't know but whose intentions were written on their faces. Malcolm approached the podium. His hands were steady. His voice was clear. Salam alaikum, brothers and sisters. That is when Norman Butler stood up, right on schedule. Get your hands out of my pockets, Butler shouted, creating the distraction they needed. Chaos erupted. People turned toward Butler. Security moved toward the commotion. And in that moment of confusion, Thomas Hagen drew his sword. Off shotgun. Malcolm saw it coming. He could have ducked, could have run, could have saved himself. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone in that room. He smiled and kept talking. Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here today to discuss the truth about human rights, about dignity, about... The first shot rang out. Hit Malcolm in the chest. He stumbled, but didn't fall. Second shot. This one should have dropped him. Didn't, because Malcolm X had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment, not just mentally, physically. He'd been wearing a bulletproof vest, hidden under his shirt. The shots hit him, but didn't kill him. And in those precious seconds between the shots and his inevitable death, Malcolm did something extraordinary. He kept talking. The truth is, Malcolm said, blood spreading across his shirt, but his voice still strong. They can kill the messenger, but they can never kill the message. The killers were confused. He should be dead. Why was he still standing? Why was he still talking? 3rd shot. 4th. 5th. Malcolm finally fell, but not before he'd spoken the words that would echo through history. Tell my people, tell them the truth about who did this. Tell them it goes higher than they think. Tell them the revolution doesn't die with one man. And then Malcolm X was gone, but here is what the assassins didn't know, what the FBI didn't know, what nobody knew except Malcolm himself. Those final 90 seconds had been broadcast live on radio. Mike Wallace's cameras had captured everything. The 15 civil rights leaders in the audience had heard every word. And most importantly, little Atala had been watching from the wings. The moment her father fell, she ran to Uncle James with those 47 letters. Within hours, Malcolm's final message was being broadcast across America. Within days, those letters were being published in newspapers worldwide. The conspiracy that killed Malcolm X was exposed. Not just the Nation of Islam's involvement, the FBI's surveillance, the CIA's interference. The politicians who'd given the green light, Malcolm's death, didn't silence the movement. It ignited it. The Black Panther Party formed 6 months later, inspired by Malcolm's final words. The civil rights movement shifted from peaceful protest to active resistance. Malcolm's autobiography, published after his death, became one of the most influential books in American history. But perhaps most importantly, Malcolm's martyrdom did something no speech ever could have done. It made him immortal. Today, 60 years later, Malcolm X is more famous than the men who killed him. More influential than the politicians who ordered his death. More powerful than the organizations that tried to silence him. His assassins dead or forgotten. The FBI agents who watched him die, retired in shame. The Nation of Islam leaders who betrayed him, their organization never recovered. But Malcolm? Malcolm's message grows stronger every year. Because Malcolm X understood something that his enemies never did. You can kill a man, but you can't kill an idea whose time has come. And on the 21st of February 1965, in those final 90 seconds, Malcolm X didn't just die, he became eternal. The boy from Omaha, who started as a criminal, became a minister, transformed into a revolutionary, and died as a martyr had accomplished something unprecedented. He'd turned his own assassination into the most powerful speech in civil rights history. But the most shocking part of this story, it is what happened to those 47 letters. 3 days after Malcolm's funeral, Uncle James opened the sealed envelope Atala had given him. Inside wasn't just evidence of the conspiracy. It was a complete blueprint for the future of civil rights in America. Malcolm had written detailed strategies for every major civil rights organization, battle plans for the next decade, legal frameworks that lawyers would use to win landmark cases in the Supreme Court. And at the bottom of the last letter, in Malcolm's handwriting, "If you are reading this, it means they succeeded in killing my body. Now make sure they fail at killing my dream." Those letters were secretly distributed to 47 civil rights leaders across the country. Each one received a piece of Malcolm's master plan. None of them knew the others had letters too. But when the Black Panther Party formed 6 months later, they were following Malcolm's blueprint. When the Poor People's Campaign marched on Washington, they were using his strategies. When civil rights lawyers argued cases in federal court, they were using legal arguments Malcolm had written in his final weeks. The conspiracy that killed Malcolm X had actually executed the most influential civil rights leader in American history. They'd turned a controversial minister into an untouchable prophet. By 1970, Malcolm X was more famous than Martin Luther King Jr. in many black communities. His autobiography was required reading in colleges worldwide. His speeches were being translated into dozens of languages. The FBI agent who'd overseen Malcolm's surveillance died in obscurity. The Nation of Islam split into factions and never recovered their power. The politicians who'd signed off on his death found themselves voted out of office by the very communities they'd tried to silence. But Malcolm's influence was just beginning. Today, when Black Lives Matter protesters march in the streets, they're carrying signs with Malcolm X quotes. When human rights activists fight oppression worldwide, they're using tactics Malcolm pioneered. When young revolutionaries study how to create change, they read Malcolm's words first. The man they killed to silence had become the loudest voice in the movement. Here is what the assassins never understood. Malcolm X wasn't just a man with a message. He was a message that became a man. And when you kill the man, the message becomes immortal. The 21st of February, 1965. Those 90 seconds in the Audubon Ballroom didn't end Malcolm X's story. They wrote his legend. The criminal from Omaha, the prisoner who found God, the minister who found truth, the revolutionary who found immortality. Malcolm X walked into that room knowing he'd die. He walked out as the most dangerous idea in American history. That is why they called him the most dangerous man in America. Not because of what he said when he was alive, but because of what his death made possible.